to say that really I've got to go back to the beginning when I really discovered music of Franz Schmidt. And this was back in 1981 when I was organ scholar at St. George's Chapel, Windsor Castle. And the then director of music, Christopher Robinson, performed one of Franz Schmidt's famous works for the organ, the Toccata in C, as part of his summer recital series that was always held every year. And I was curious. I thought, well, who is this Franz Schmidt? So before his recital, he actually played it as a voluntary. So I knew nothing about it until he played it at the end of Evensong. Well, I mean, the rest is history, because I went and bought the score and learnt the piece. I mean, it's phenomenally difficult, but it's a work which is so beautiful. It's virtuosic, lyrical. It's very orchestral in its kind of concept, and the harmonic language, I mean, just really spoke to me. This great way of using this very romantic, almost sometimes jazz-like harmony. I mean, not in the literal sense of the word, but using the kind of chords that are associated with jazz. And so that then led me on to discover more music of Franz Schmidt. And I think that, I forget when it was, probably a little bit later, probably in 1983 or 4, that Radio 3, ran a series on, Composer of the Week. So of course I was absolutely glued to every broadcast in the morning at 9 o'clock. I'd be there, with the cassette recorder recording all of the music, and it was interesting to sort of to get a whole deluge in a way of a lot of his famous chamber music, symphonies, other orchestral works. And so began my long quest really with discovering more about Franz Schmidt. Now, I've actually gone forward a bit, because I really should have said that after I left St. George's in 1982 or 83, I went to Vienna actually to study at the Hochschule. And for my examination, I played the Toccata in C.
Oh wow!
Franz Schmidt. Well, I mean, you can imagine that the examiners, or just the board, were just bowled over. So, well, first of all, how come an English organist was playing, or knew about the music of Franz Schmidt and could play it? So, I don't know whether that helped me to further my cause of admittance into the Vienna Hochschule. But it was interesting, because there, I mean, I was only there for 6 months, but again, I discovered more music of Franz Schmidt. The Fredegundis. I managed to get a recording of his opera Fredegundis. There was an organist there who played the variations on the theme from Fredegundis' great organ work, which I recorded a couple of years ago. But the theme, I mean, is used in the opera, this fanfare, and actually listening to the original fanfare, it's actually quite interesting, because there's a few things that are not in the organ score, like for instance the end of at the end of the variation, and it goes in the brass play, so in the organ version I add that, because I think it's very, very important, because that's part of the original. But the variations again are they're all again very difficult, especially the faster variations. There's the introduction, then you've got this whole sort of build up, and then the slow version, then the first virtuosity, the slow version in D minor, and then the next variation, and then this F sharp variation, this one that you really feel that this is a section where Schmidt is playing the cello solo in it. This is his solo really. Played in the pedal with this pedal, and the manual's making this, but the theme in the pedal, and that's definitely a cello solo. But it's wonderful the way that he builds this very. I mean, and again, as an organist, you have to think about this as a big orchestral piece, no question about it. I mean, I register it not as he registered it, asked to register it. It's all mixtures are very clean, but I actually register it on the tutti, the big theme here, and I play it very orchestrally, because that's the only way. That's the only way I can really make sense of it. Otherwise, for me, it can be a bit. And then some of the tempo indications, again, I play them, much quicker, because I mean, it's just the theme. The theme that's the theme, isn't it? But otherwise, how long does it take to state the theme? So to just get on with it. But then, as I said, it's not until I think of it as if I was actually having an orchestra in front of me, I think, well, how would the orchestra play it? That's it. And that for me is very, very important, how to get it to work. So anyway, so that was the basic of it, the basis of it. And so, back in 1981, that was the discovery of the Toccata in C. And then, so, I didn't start conducting until rather late, much later. So, it was always an ambition of mine to conduct the Second Symphony. So I got the first opportunity to conduct it in Milano with the Orchestra Verdi. And it's a phenomenal score. It really is a phenomenal score. And I'm actually sitting here with the score because, it's just such an amazing piece to look at. I mean, and to conduct it, it's an amazing piece to conduct. I mean, it's very demanding. It's a very demanding piece, but it's it's an amazing piece. And, I look at it, and as I say, I've got the score out in front of me here, but I look in the first movement, for instance, at letter D. There's 8 bars before the second subject. It's a kind of little transition. But looking at the score, it's a massive black notes and divisi of all sections in the strings. 3 parts, 6 parts in the first violin, 6 parts in the second. The violas, cellos, double basses could only be divisi in well, actually, it's actually in 4 parts for the double basses. And it's just an amazing, sight to see this. And then it's all over in a couple of seconds. But just the effect of it. And then, as I said, for my favorite movement in this is really the second movement, where Franz Schmidt takes this wonderful idea of theme and variation, which is one of my favorite forms of music for improvisation, and makes this amazing, structure of the theme is like a chorale, and then there's various, all the sections of the orchestra get to play it. First the winds, and then the strings, and and it's fantastic. And then in between this is all these scherzos. So it's like, But I always say
2 movements in one, isn't it?
It is really. It's like 2 movements in one. Yeah, that's it. But then, for me, I think one of the most amazing moments in musical history takes place at the very end of the scherzo. There are 4 bars, and I'm just going to find the page. It's here we're coming up to it. Yeah, this is it. Yeah, this is it. I don't know how he managed those 4 bars, including the 5 bars if you include the resolution, but it is bars 183 to 186, 180 to 187. These chords of magnificence, as my sister would say, how he is able to it's the harmonic language here is, for me, is just phenomenal. For me, it's the inner voices of the 3rd horn and the 5th horn that have to really get these voices out. This dee sort of all chromaticism, and it's difficult for me to describe it sitting here. I just wish I was sitting at a piano, and then maybe I could play it. But I've sort of taken this, from a recording and just chopped and pasted this bit and listened to it over and over again to just think that, how is it possible that one could actually dream up this, this amazing 4 or 5 bar moment of real musical genius?
Well, and make it sound so good. I mean, his hearing for the orchestra. I mean, people talk about him being an organist, but his balance and his orchestral writing is extraordinary.
It is, yeah.
I love what you say about the inner voices, and it's quite funny whenever Franz Schmidt writes about an organ that he's just played, he's always complaining about it normally, that he can't hear the inner voices of his own counterpoint.
Yeah, because every note is so important, This bit in the Second Symphony,
yeah. Well, exactly. And in the Second Symphony, every single note, there's no sort of
no wastage.
Yeah.
No, there's no wastage. As I said, that's those 8 bars between letter D and the second subject of all the divisi and this. It's mad. It probably lasts about maybe 12 seconds, if that. But it's just like a shifting from one bit, introducing and that's the next second subject. It's just
You're passionate about the second, aren't you?
Yeah, I would. Yeah, the second stands out for me as being the crowning glory of, of his symphonies.
Could
I would
you
listen to this.
could you put into words why?
Why is it? I think harmonically of all the symphonies, this one speaks to me in a way that the others don't. Um, it's just very, it's. I think it's a combination of many different things in this piece that are not. I mean, there's a lot of things in the other symphonies, of course, but this piece, especially the second movement, and somehow I think it just hangs together. It just seems to be more as a piece. It just sort of hangs together, And I mean, it's interesting. One, I don't know whether you've conducted Mahler 7. I've never conducted Mahler 7th Symphony, but a lot of people say that the last movement is a hell to deal with because it's just not, it's very strange because it's all so fragmented and how do you make sense of it?
Yeah, it thrives on fragmentation and schizophrenia almost.
Yeah, that's
joyous
it. Yeah,
schizophrenia. And
that's it. Yeah, but it's just how you approach it as a conductor and so on. But in a way, the last movement of the second symphony can be a little bit like that. That huge introduction, that huge chorale introduction, the brass and the wind and the strings, and then you got the next that lead up to all of that, and that wonderful couple of bars that leads into there's some interesting jazz chords that come there, which again I make a big thing of because it's just and then of course that last that wonderful triumphant ending, the brass and the fanfares and everything else going on, the threes and it's fascinating. But I think it's a very interesting question. For me, this piece just stands out. It's a piece that I always go back to, and if I had to listen to them all, and I'm fascinated with any new recordings that come out because it's always interesting to hear. But somehow I always start by going to the second symphony and say, oh wow, they do with that. And that's one that.
I love that two of the bits that you've got most excited about are actually transitions. And that, I mean, I might be putting words in your mouth here, but one of the things I love so much about Schmidt's music is that there's nothing not taken care of. He takes such great care of every single detail. And I would say that your love of his transitions is a perfect example. Another composer might have a great first subject, great second subject, and the bit in between is just to get between.
Neither here nor there. Yeah, just to get.
But for him, that's where the energy is. That's where the emotion is.
Exactly. So letter D, first movement. That's one. That's just so well taken care of, and when you listen to it, it's like, oh, right. Then here we are. And then you want to see how it looks on the page, and then you get the score and think, my God, I mean, it's a work of art in itself.
Do you find when you're working with orchestras on this that the music plays itself, or you need to sort of help them, or through rehearsals you find your way through?
Yeah, well, it's a combination of both actually, because in some ways I can be very naughty and say, for my own satisfaction, I want to hear the bits that I really want to hear. So I sort of rehearse these bits. Oh, let's hear this, and let's hear this bit. Let's see how it really sounds. And I sort of revel in that bit. And then I want to take maybe the second movement and do this, the beginning of the second movement, just to hear the chorale. And then there's a variation where you have this movement between the various winds and the clarinets and different sections of the woodwind in this kind of question answer, and it's fabulous. And then well, we could talk all day, but I mean this thing of how Franz Schmidt uses sequential modulation. And that's very evident, of course, in the second movement, where in the sketch of this ti da dee da ya dum bum be dum ya, and then he changes key completely. It's something else, and the whole thing is again. And this is how he does it. And even in the third symphony as well, in the scherzo, you hear it as well. It's yum ba-dum ding dum dum ba-dum dum yum ba-dum. It's a sort of in a totally different key, A major, then D flat major, then. It's just fabulous the way that he he uses all these sort of things. I mean,
And if you were bringing a friend who maybe knows some classical music but doesn't know any Schmidt to a performance of the Second Symphony, would you have sort of to give them a little framework of the piece of how to listen through it? Would you have some advice, or just sit and listen, or?
oh, I just said, let's do it.
Yeah.
And if it hits you in the same way that it hit me, then I think that's great in itself. That's enough. I think you just need to just listen. I don't want to sort of say, oh, by the way, you've got to listen to this, because that's coming from me. That's how I listen to it.
Yeah.
But I remember my first time of hearing the Second Symphony, and as it, like when you listen to the Fourth Symphony, it's that feeling of being, wow, yeah. I mean, we talked a lot about the Second Symphony, but what about some other works, like for instance, the variations on a Hussars song? You know,
yeah,
great piece, great piece.
Well, all the Fredegundis variations.
Fredegundis variations.
I mean, Schmidt loved his variations. There's variations in almost every piece somewhere.
Yeah. This theme and variation is a great, as I said, for me, it's a great tool of, starting with improvisation, because there's so much you can do with it, and the way that Schmidt uses this this form so brilliantly and so, it's thorough. It's a thorough use of the, making every single use of the possibilities in this form, and making it all sound so musically brilliant. And
well, he very rarely, it's not when we think of variations, we often think Mozart, where you have a theme, a variation, but he's often, or he's always with his variations, sort of weaving sonata forms, or two movements into it, or, dramatic lines that go through the variations.
Yeah, very much so. And I mean, it's so clever the way that he takes a very simple theme, and then it's, I mean, okay, going back to the Second Symphony again, this wonderful gypsy section, the F sharp major, which again he brings back in the finale. But it's just this interesting transition of how he's able to take, from B flat major, and then this using this theme, and it almost seems like a new theme in itself, doesn't it?
Mm.
And taking bits of what's gone before in the second movement and making it, this is the mood of it. Yeah, I mean, he makes it. It's.
But you still remember it somehow as well, and it's reminiscent, and you've heard it before, but it's new and fresh at the same time.
Yeah, of course, yeah. And that's the fabulous thing about it. And as I said, really, one should never stop learning and discovering. I think there's, and no matter how well you know a piece, there's always something new to discover about it. When you go to conduct a different orchestra, or you could hear something differently here about the way they play this bit or something. I think, oh, that's interesting. I think, but as I said, and you said also at the beginning that the way that Franz Schmidt is able to write so well for the orchestra, and the balance and the transparency, and that's the job of a conductor, to make sure that everything doesn't sound just always on the same level, but to be able to make sure that you can really hear all the details that you want to hear, and just make the orchestra aware of the fact that one needs to hear this bit or whatever. And it's a fantastic piece which deserves to be played more often.